Good afternoon and welcome to this webinar on how we use protective marking to help us share and protect the information that's really critical to policing. Today we're going to be joined by Matthew Clark, who's from the Change team at Dyfed-Powys. I knew I'd get that wrong. Dyfed-Powys Police, who's going to share his experience and the force's experience in using the protective marking features that are built into the national blueprint and allow forces to use the features within 365, both in email and file management. So in a few minutes, I'll ask Matthew to share some of that knowledge from a force perspective. But what we're talking about today is really aimed at the frontline user rather than something complex for the technical implementation. It's for everyone in our forces who's sending emails, editing or creating documents, or even reviewing documents and information, has a significant role and responsibility in protecting the information, that data that's so vital to our daily work. Around the clock, members of the public entrust the police service with some very highly sensitive personal information that they give us on a couple of basic but really fundamental expectations. Firstly, that we're going to use that information to help protect them and others from harm or to bring offenders to justice. But more secondly, and really importantly, given the challenge that policing currently is facing, that we protect that information, we protect their trust in us, and we make sure that only those that need it see it. So we have a big responsibility for everybody in policing to look after the data. If we fail to protect this information, we damage that trust, which is essential to the way we police in the UK. And of course, it's not only on the individual, it damages trust wider than that. So we've really got to use the tools we've got. And when we were setting up the NEP, we looked at how we would manage information, not just within the productivity suite of Microsoft 365, but how the identity access management works and how the proactive side of our cybersecurity with the National Management Centre all fit together as part of a way to allow us to work really effectively, because sharing is really important to allow us to do the action that the public expect, but also to be able to protect that information and have that fully audited, fully secured environment that is absolutely essential. As normal, we want this to be an interactive session, so drop your questions into the chat and we'll bring them in over the next half an hour. And of course, we'll be adding this recording to the library that's available on transformation.police.uk/watch as soon as possible after today, so you'll be able to play it back at any time. And once you've watched this video, like any of the other ones, please, you can help raise awareness of these subjects in force and that knowledge. You can embed these into your own SharePoint sites, share them on. We do encourage that so that more and more people see them and get value out of them. That way we also know what's most interesting to you, so we can keep the content moving and keep it forward. In the chat on screen at the moment, there is a link to our feedback form. Please use that, give us some suggestions, or if you offer up anything you'd want to share with us, please do so. So as Matthew gets his screen ready to share, we'll get into the first question. So Matthew, good morning, good afternoon, and welcome to the webinar. Could you explain what protective marking means and why it's so important?
Thank you for the introduction, David. Yeah, so protective markings, it's a means of securely classifying the information that we hold. By doing this, we're highlighting the importance and the sensitivity of it by using markers. So obviously there's markers set out by the national standards. We've obviously got official sensitive, along with more granular ones then. So these define the handling, transmission, storage and disposal of the documents. And this would also have an impact then on the severity of if there was to be, disclosure of that information when it shouldn't be. And as you've already said, David, it's crucial that the public have confidence that we look after this information and that we handle it correctly, obviously to provide, their confidence in us.
Excellent. So there is a national standard that you mentioned, but there is an opportunity for local variance. What sort of challenges might that bring up?
I know our experience as a forces, we are early on in our adoption, so we're currently only using official and official sensitive protective marking only. I do know in terms of, like UK policing only, there are certain markings which would allow us to only share with policing colleagues, for example. This is particularly beneficial for when we come to introduce our MARAC use case. We're potentially obviously going to have a team where we're going to have members from the NHS and other partner agencies in there. So by being able to mark documents correctly, then this will allow security and only the right people to have access at the right time.
That's fantastic. So in terms of how do you do it? So perhaps if you could share your screen and show us a Word document.
Yeah, of course.
What sort of thing can you do? Because obviously what we'll show is in Word, or that could absolutely apply to PowerPoint, Excel, and of course Outlook as well. So perhaps you could start by sharing your screen and then talk us through the sort of process that you go through in Dyfed-Powys. So I keep going to get that conscious now.
Yeah.
So pop your screen live.
There
you go.
There we go. We should be able to see that. Yeah.
Yeah, there you go.
There we go. So this is like a Word document, a test one. So enable to apply the sensitivity labeling. We've got the options here. So let's say at the moment in Dyfed-Powys, we've only got official and official sensitive, protective marking only. However, there are obviously further ones which we're going to be introducing in the coming months. So obviously, naturally, they're applied as official across the board. It's the way it's configured with us. However, that can be changed. And should you wish to, for example, if you had official sensitive and you wanted to reduce the classification just to official, you do need to provide justification for this. So there is like a clear audit of that. An experience we have had is that prior to us moving across to 365, we were using the Titus classifications instead. So a few queries we've had from staff have been, how do I mark my documents? Because it's something that's automatically done. To be honest, that is part of the reason why we've looked for this webinar to be introduced, because we are aware it's not an isolated incident in Dyfed-Powys, it's a national thing, of course.
And of course, the protective marking has an impact depending on the way that you share the document. Traditionally, we share documents by attaching them to emails, but of course, we did a webinar a couple of weeks ago on collaboration, and we'll pop the link into the recording. But what's the big difference when you are sharing documents rather than attaching them to emails, and how protective marking works with that?
In terms of sharing something via email, by providing a link only, the protective marking is going with the document. So, for example, you have the ability to revoke a link that's sent, whereas if the document's sent to somebody as an attachment, you can't easily pull that back. And within reason, if you do request somebody to delete that email, you're going off their word only. Whereas obviously with sharing links, it's far more secure. You're able to revoke that yourself. And I can similarly, if you were to change the classification of a document via a sharing link, it would also that classification would go with it. So if it was sent to a colleague who potentially wasn't the right level of classification, wasn't at the right level. For example, if it was UK policing only classification that was applied, then anyone who wouldn't be granted permission to that would automatically not be able to access the link anymore. I'll just give a little demonstration then of how to actually share the document and these different methods I'm speaking about. There we go. I'll just send it to one of my colleagues.
Kelly helpfully volunteered you for this webinar, didn't she?
Yes, she did. Yeah, she has a meeting all day, apparently. There we go. So I've just sent that now. And in terms of being able to see who has access to the document, we should be able to see here. There we go. So it'll show here who has access to this document. And you can easily remove the link and basically stop access. So, for example, if we had sent out, if there was a document discovered to have been sent incorrectly, we can easily revoke that link to, cut, basically reduce the risk then.
Yeah. And of course, as we collaborate with our partners quite a lot more and more now, the document might be the one document that we constantly update, and all of a sudden the content suddenly could become a change of rating, and that could revoke the access of those partners.
Of course, yeah, that's something that yeah, you know, if we change it to UK policing only, and partner agencies may not be able to see or wouldn't be able to see the document then. So particularly in like collaboration environments and teams, that's something that is, you know, it's essential really, and you know, it's a massive bonus to us.
Absolutely, and of course that's less actions then just by changing the marking, even if they've still got the link and the link's still live. If your identity doesn't allow you access to that document on that rating, then of course you've immediately revoked that rating. So that's a really important thing that we need to do. And again, it's fully audited as well within the 365 environment. You've just covered how you can see that people have got access, but that also impacts on groups, doesn't it, Matthew?
Yes, it does. Yeah. So can you just rephrase that? Sorry.
Yeah. So we shared an example where you've said access is based on an individual's rights, but of course it could be that a whole group of people have got access, and you can see that whole group have got those rights as well in the bottom of the screen.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's something that I think by the same method, it's able to actually, you can revoke access. I mean, there's different ways of doing this. Ooh. There we go. From within here, we can go to manage access.
And this one's an individual one, but you can.
Yeah, it is actually. Sorry, yeah. But basically, the same principle applies, whereby it's possible to, via manage access, to actually remove access. And there's also options for, I think it's probably been covered previously, where you can actually reduce, you know, permissions to allow editing and to block downloads. So again, that's something which is, you know, an extra security feature, isn't it? That is brilliant.
Now, in the force, you've already set it up so that every document is set by the official by default.
That's it. Yeah.
Has that been helped colleagues to recognise that they're doing this, or has it become almost seamless now? Because the vast majority of the content we actually deal with on the 365 is official, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah. So by default, everything's official. In terms of challenges, you know, I think colleagues are aware of that now, and we're doing our best to actually, you know, put that out across the organisation. So I've used a few different methods, such as we have created a SWAY document, basically outlining a few security features. And again, that's one of the reasons why we requested a webinar such as this, for us to kind of highlight the importance of it, which we can take back internally then as well.
So you probably get asked, what's the difference between official and official sensitive? What sort of examples would you give that would mean that it would change the rating?
Obviously, official by standard would just be routine police communications, but then official sensitive would be in line with the data protection principles, the more protected characteristics. So that is something as well on the documents where you actually highlight over the official and official sensitive. We've got it applied where it basically gives a breakdown of what you know, what would meet that criteria. So that's something which, you know, makes it easy for users to know what the correct classification is. Because as we said at the beginning, you know, it does rely on individuals using their own judgment as well to mark it as the correct classification.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, we're doing a lot of work at a national level, and I'm going to bring Simon Pountane in, who works in the NEP, in a second. We've been doing a lot of work with the information security officers across policing. What sort of feedback do you get about the protective marking, and how can this help the people working at a force level to manage their marking? Simon, are you able to unmute?
Sorry, hi David. Sorry, fighting with the mute button again. So from my perspective, I've been doing a lot of work with the data protection and records management communities, and the answer for me around that and this is around consistency. And if the designs are able to give a consistent approach to all of those issues, then it's going to really help to deal with the challenges that policing faces in all of these areas. So Matthew's covered off some of the bits around for that consistency. So you're using a couple of those, the protected markings in force. And what we've seen is some forces that want to extend the protected marking scheme and have their own criteria. So, for example, official sensitive brackets courts or official sensitive brackets CPS, which is fine internally, but as soon as you go external to another force, they won't understand what that means. So keeping to those set standards, the national standard of the protected marking will really help. So that's what we've been trying to look to do around data protection as well. So we have the NEP Data Protection Impact Assessment, which is a consistent document which forces are able to use to create their own document. They can amend it if they need to from dealing with local issues of risk. And then we've also started to build on the appendices to that document in each individual aspect of 365, so 18 or so different apps that come with 365, again to get some consistency, not only in having that one set of documents, but also trying to prevent 43 forces from doing 43 different DPIAs, 43 times 18 different of those appendices. And I think that consistency bit goes across all of those things. Now, having said consistency, of course, some forces were going to want to do things slightly differently themselves. So, for example, in terms of retention of records, people will want to have their own appetite to retaining records for a certain period of time. So chat in Teams might well be kept in one force for 3 weeks, another force for a month, etc. Just if I can just use this platform just to say to people that the current NEP design says that all that information gets kept forever. That doesn't have to be the case, because we all know on the call that actually that's not proportionate to do so, and you can make local changes to do that without coming back through the NEP to make them. So please make the changes to reflect your own appetite for risk. The National Records Management Team may look at having some consistent national standards around that, and certainly where they fit into national MOPI they will do, but those other ones then do your own and change them yourselves. But I think the key message then for me around this is consistent approach. The assurance allows you then to work across the national structure without any confusion, and that's where I think this bit around the protected marking helps, and encouraging people like you're doing in your force, Matthew, to use them, to understand what they're there for, is really helpful.
And we do have a question that's coming, and I'll ask Matthew to come into this then. So when sharing documents using Share, is this pulling documents from OneDrive rather than sites?
Yes, it is. Like that document that I shared to you there, showed you there, was one I saved in my OneDrive. So you have the option of sharing it through the actual document itself, or by clicking on it from within your OneDrive.
And of course you can do that if you save into a shared drive in SharePoint as well. You know, if you've got a folder that you're all working on as a team, you can still share from the same one. The experience is the same. It's the OneDrive stroke SharePoint of where files are saved. It gives you the same experience across the board. So that works really well. In terms of how much of a difference does this make to working across border? Because crime doesn't recognise borders. So how does having consistent marking help us when we are working with our neighbouring forces? Matthew, again, if you could first.
As I said, we are quite early on in our adoption, so we haven't got too much experience of sharing in the 365 world. However, you know, as we've alluded to before, the benefits are, you know, of keeping to the standard markings are going to be essential. And as I mentioned, you know, UK policing only, you know, applying specific ones will obviously present many benefits, particularly working through teams as well, you know, in specific force tenants.
Yeah, and of course everything in Teams is official by default because of the same settings. And Simon, we're doing a lot of work across border with forces, aren't we? And again, this consistency is really vital to that, isn't it?
Yeah, and I think the key for me there again is that our partners, both from a police perspective, but also our other law enforcement partners, will actually be reassured by the fact that we're using that consistent approach to protected marking. So working with the NCA, with the borders agencies, and with other people that we work with on a regular basis at CPS, having that approach and having them understand that we're doing it and using it, and they see that it's the same as they're getting from other places, is going to reassure them that the information they're getting and that the approach that we're taking is going to be protecting their information as well.
I think one of the things is as well is, you know, this is a responsibility of every user to mark things effectively. So the user experience is really simple. It's just a drop down, isn't it? And it asks for justification, which is automatically retained in the platform. Another question, Simon, if you know, to you on this one, do we not need the same consistency on retention? For example, if we could see a scenario where they've emailed something to another force, we've now deleted under our retention rules, but they haven't. Seems a bit nonsensical to the person who's put this comment in. What's your view and the view that we're getting back from the ISO community?
Whoever Anonymous is, I'm with you. I think it would be fantastic to have a consistent approach across the country to this, but we're dealing with 43 different forces led by 43 chiefs, led by 43 different PCCs, and each of those will have their own appetite to risk. And so we end up with different approaches, and we have to flex with that and deal with it. So you're absolutely right. There should be. It would be great if there was a national standard. So if I go to one force and say, look, 3 weeks ago you had this information, I need it for an investigation. Sorry, it's been deleted. But my force keeps it for 2 months. Why didn't you? It's not helpful in terms of what we're trying to say here around consistency. So agree completely. I am working with the records management community. They are alive to that, and so it's just getting that national consistency across those 43 different risk appetites. I think it's a real challenge, and hopefully people on the call will see that across all aspects of policing. It's something that is difficult, but not something that we're not trying to do.
So Matthew, obviously it's now you're rolling this out across the force. What sort of thing are you doing to help your frontline users, every member of staff, every officer, to understand how to use the marking at the moment?
Basically, whenever we do migrate specific users, we do send out a migration guidance document to them, and this is something we've included partly through feedback, because as mentioned, we did have like tightest classifications prior to 365. So to use, it's obviously a big change, and vitally, they have been raising concerns that they don't know what's happening with the classification. So yeah, it's something that we have put in that document that goes out to all users. We've also developed a SWE then, which will look, which covers the classifications on emails and how to share securely, all of the things that we've covered. So those are the main ways we're doing it. And similarly, on Learning Pathways, we are actually adding a security, customized security page on that to basically try and get out there as much as we can.
Thank you, Matthew. And one last question for Simon before I start to wrap us up in a second. We've had one question asking us, can secret level data be stored on the 0365? We're not assured for that at the moment, are we?
No, so if you don't mind, I'll cover this question, but there's one other little bit I wanted to just add before I finish. But no, you're absolutely right. The Office 365 and the NEP build is only assured up to official sensitive. So secret level data should not be retained within at the structure that you have around 365. It's not there yet, and there are other ways that information will be stored locally in your own local systems, and those technical ways that's done by the people that need to do that. And the other thing I was just going to say was that what we're talking about today isn't new. These protective marking schemes have been around for some time now, and police officers and staff are aware of what they are. What I think the 365 toolkit does is make it easier, because it's at the top of that document, the top of that Word document, the top of the other thing that you're doing. It gives you the opportunity to classify the document, and it actually explains then what that classification means. So it almost is putting it into people's faces that's there, and it's easier then to achieve. So hopefully this then allows us as a law enforcement community to get that consistent approach and to get people understanding the rules properly using these new tools that we have in front of us.
Because traditionally we've just put it in the footer of a document and assumed that makes a difference. But of course, by doing it this way, we're actually enabling the technology to help us protect the information, which is the difference, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thank you. So I'm going to start wrapping it up and thank Matthew for joining us today. That's fantastic that you've been able to share this. It's a really vital part of our daily business that we must keep focused on and do this. And of course, please get in touch if you've got any more information, and we can connect you to the right people. Just a reminder about upcoming events. Now, we don't have a webinar next week. We do have another one before the Christmas break, but next week is the National APCC NPCC Home Office Roadshows to Forces are taking place. That's Tuesday and Wednesday next week. So we'll have a number of colleagues involved in that during the live event. So we're going to avoid clashing with them and supporting them in making sure that everybody's aware of what's going on in national programmes levels. We're speaking on the afternoon of the Tuesday as part of all the delivery updates from the Police Digital Service, so you'll be able to get the latest updates on how we're moving forward beyond the next couple of months. If you haven't got an invite to that and you're part of the police audience, if you reach out through the NEP newsletter, you'll see an article in the NEP newsletter which will be in the chat. You can click that link there and that will be automatically sent through to the organisers so you can get an invite to the sessions. We will be back the week after and we'll post the details of that on the website and the enabling centre shortly. Also, we have a couple of other interactive events planned in the next couple of weeks, where we've got the internal comms workshop on the 13th of December, which will pick up on last week's SharePoint webinar. Also on the following day, on the 14th, we've got our first Identity Access Management user group, which will bring together all those involved in that Pacific area business of protecting the IT estate. Details for both are on the website as normal. And you may have noticed we've launched our NEP Advent campaign this morning. Every day from now till Christmas, including weekends, we'll be posting a helpful hint, tip or video guide on our website, on our social media and on the Enabling Centre, which will help you get the very best out of the NEP and 365 platforms. They're very short cheat sheets, 90-second videos, things that are really focused on helping you to get the best out of the tools that you're doing. Whether you're an experienced user or a new user, we hope you'll find some of this really helpful to you. And of course, what you can do is share them into your own teams via Teams, so you can help other people understand the tools that are available to them. So today is a Microsoft Outlook cheat sheet. So some of the things that we all think we know about in 365, we don't always know about. So you'll be able to use that and pick up on those as we carry on rolling out 365 to more and more forces. So thanks very much. And for once, I'm not saying see you next week. We'll see you the week after. So thanks a lot, everybody, for joining us today.